It was a Friday evening in April 1947. A steelworker in Pittsburgh walked home from the mill with $50.20 in his pocket. He had worked 6 days that week, 56 hours, for the standard mill wage. His name doesn't matter. He stood for millions of American men who came home with that same envelope on that same evening. He set the cash on the kitchen table. His wife sorted it before dinner. By the time the family sat down to eat, every dollar he had earned that week was already assigned to a category. And by the end of that same year, the family had saved enough to buy a used Ford. This is how an American household lived on $50 a week, and why we have largely lost the ability to do the same. $50 in 1947, adjusted for inflation, equals roughly $700 today. That is around $36,000 a year. Today, a household earning $36,000 cannot afford the median rent in most American cities. And yet, on that exact wage, the family in Pittsburgh and millions of households just like them owned a home. They sent their children to school in new shoes. They sat down to 3 meals a day. They put money in the bank every Friday. And when they retired, they did so without debt. The cost of living has risen faster than wages. That explanation is true, but it is incomplete. Because what changed isn't only the price of milk or the cost of a mortgage. What changed is the entire architecture of how Americans handled money. This is the story of that architecture and what we built in its place. Let's go back to the kitchen table in Pittsburgh, where the $50.20 has just been sorted. 11 envelopes, each one labeled in pencil, each one with its share of the week. The largest envelope holds $8.75. That is rent. The family lives in a 2-bedroom row house on the south side of Pittsburgh, one of thousands built before the war for steelworkers and their families. The rent, including water, is $35 a month, 17% of the household's income. The general rule taught in the 1940s was that housing should never consume more than a quarter of wages. According to historical data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, working-class American households of the period typically held to that line. Today, the average American household spends close to 40% of income on housing. We did not just get poorer relative to housing, we changed the rule. The second envelope holds $13. That is food for the week. $13 in 1947 bought a family of 4 roughly 30 pounds of vegetables, 10 pounds of meat, milk delivered 3 times a week, flour, sugar, coffee, eggs, butter, and bread baked at home from that flour. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics consumer expenditure surveys from the late 1940s, food consumed roughly 25 to 30% of working-class household income. Today, despite massive gains in food production efficiency, food spending as a share of income has dropped to around 13%. But food waste has risen to nearly 40% of what we buy. We pay less, we throw away more. The math is uncomfortable. The third envelope holds $4, utilities and coal. Electricity in the house was used sparingly, 1 bulb at a time. The icebox sat in the corner of the kitchen, refilled twice a week by the iceman. Heating came from a coal furnace in the basement, fed once or twice a day. Coal cost roughly $12 a ton, and a working-class family used 6 to 8 tons across a winter. That was the heat for the entire season. The combined electric, gas, water, and coal cost stayed under $15 a month, mostly because the home itself was small. 1,200 square feet was a generous size for a working family. Today, the average new American home is more than 2,300 square feet. We heat and cool twice the space, with twice the appliances, on roughly the same energy infrastructure. Our power bills reflect that. The fourth envelope holds $2. Clothing. This was not for new clothing. The family bought new clothes once or twice a year, at the start of school and at Easter. The $2 a week went into a clothing fund that built up slowly until needed. Most clothes were mended, hemmed, or passed down through siblings and cousins. We covered the mending basket in last week's video.
The fifth envelope holds $2. Transportation. Pittsburgh in 1947 had a working streetcar system. The mill worker rode one to the plant and back 5 days a week. The family did not own a car yet. They were saving for a used Ford, which they would buy in cash the following spring. $2 a week covered streetcar fares, with 70 cents left over. The sixth envelope holds $3.50. Savings. Of that, $1.50 went into the Christmas club at the neighborhood bank, locked away until November. $2 went into the passbook savings account at the same bank, the rainy day account. Both deposits happened every Friday without exception. Both were stamped in passbooks the family carried home and stored in the same drawer as the envelopes. The seventh envelope holds $1.50. Life insurance, paid weekly through a door-to-door insurance agent who collected from every working-class family on the block. A small policy, $1,500 in death benefit, enough to cover a burial and leave a little behind. Every family carried one. The agent came every Tuesday evening with a leather-bound ledger. That weekly ritual, paying the insurance man in person, was how every working-class family in America bought protection for 2 generations. It is hard to imagine a salesman knocking on doors today for a $1,500 policy. We have replaced him with a phone app, and we are not better insured for it. The eighth envelope holds $1, the doctor and medicine fund. There was no health insurance in the modern sense. Doctors made house calls for $2. Medicine came from the drugstore on Carson Street. $1 a week accumulated into a small reserve. The ninth envelope holds $1, the church offering and charity envelope. 50 cents went into the Sunday plate. 50 cents was set aside for neighbors in need. The 10th envelope holds $4, discretionary. A movie at the Picture House, a bottle of beer on Saturday, a bag of penny candy for the children, a small piece of fabric for a homemade dress. The 10th envelope was usually empty by Thursday. That $4 represented the entire pleasure budget for the week. We spend that on coffee now, in a single morning, without thinking. The discretionary envelope was the only place in the family budget where wanting was permitted at all, and it was kept deliberately small. That accounts for $40.75. The remaining $9.45 goes directly into a second savings book at the bank, separate from the rainy day account. Untouched, compounded, saved. The family has just allocated their week. $50.20 in, $12.95 out to savings of various kinds, every bill paid, every meal accounted for. By the end of the year, they will have saved roughly $670, roughly 26% of their gross income. In 1947, that was not an extraordinary household. That was a disciplined one. So what made this possible? 3 things, and we have lost all 3.
If any of this is starting to make sense of why you feel financially squeezed compared to your grandparents, hit subscribe. We tell these stories every week. Now, back to the architecture. The first was the cost structure of the era. Rent was cheap. There was a massive pre-war and wartime housing supply built specifically for working families. The Federal Housing Administration, established in 1934, had spent more than a decade guaranteeing mortgages for affordable construction. By 1947, working-class neighborhoods like Pittsburgh's South Side were saturated with row houses purpose-built for steel families. A three-bedroom home in those neighborhoods cost roughly $5,000 total, 2.5 years of household income. Today, the same kind of home in the same kind of neighborhood costs 10 to 15 times the median household income for that area. The second was the social structure. Most working-class women in 1947 did not work outside the home. That seems today like a disadvantage. In strict income terms, it was. But it also meant that one full adult every day ran the household as a productive economic unit. She bought food in bulk and prepared it at home. She mended and made clothing. She canned and preserved garden produce. She managed the 11 envelopes. The labor that today shows up as restaurants, daycare, laundry services, prepared meals, and convenience purchases was all done at home. The dollar value of that labor, by modern estimates, was equivalent to a second full-time income. The third was the retail and credit structure itself. There was no online shopping. There were no credit cards. Major purchases moved through layaway. Catalogs from Sears Roebuck and Montgomery Ward were ordered against cash, not credit. The friction of buying anything large meant that wanting and getting were separated by weeks or months. That separation killed most impulse purchases before they happened. These three pillars, cheap housing, single-income domestic labor, and high-friction retail, are all gone. Each one disappeared at a different rate for different reasons between roughly 1960 and the year 2000. When did the architecture come apart? The shift began in the early 1960s and accelerated through the 70s. Suburban housing prices began climbing as federal housing policy shifted from working-class neighborhoods to broader subsidization. Two-income households became the economic necessity rather than the exception. Credit cards, introduced widely after Bank AmeriCard in 1958, removed the friction between wanting and buying. By the early 1980s, layaway was disappearing from major retailers. By the late 1990s, household savings rates had dropped from the wartime 21% peak of 1944 to below 5%. The decline kept going. By 2005, the personal savings rate hit zero and in some months turned negative. American households, on the margin, were spending what they earned and sometimes more. The architecture our grandparents lived inside had been replaced with something that depended on debt instead of discipline. What we lost was not just a budget, it was a system. The envelopes only worked because the housing was affordable. The housing was only affordable because the cost structure protected it. The cost structure only protected it because the social structure supported it. Every piece reinforced every other piece. When one pillar moved, the others followed. We did not gradually become worse with money. We had the architecture removed from underneath us, one pillar at a time, over 40 years. The steelworker in Pittsburgh, by the way, did buy that used Ford in 1948. His family moved into a row house they purchased outright in 1954, fully paid off by 1963. He retired from the mill in 1971 with a small pension, a paid-off home, and money in the bank. His grandchildren, working today in jobs that pay 4 times what he earned in real terms, are struggling to do any of those things. Not because they are less disciplined than he was, but because the world that rewarded his discipline no longer exists. That is the loss. And it is the reason this channel exists. To remember what the architecture looked like. To name what we used to know. And, in some small way, to recover whatever pieces of it we still can. If any of this hit home, subscribe. Next week, we are walking through 15 Depression-era money rules the federal government would rather you didn't remember. The rules that came before the architecture, and maybe the only way back to it.